welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined as always by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello, hello.
And I'd like for everyone to bear with us. We just did the first 5 minutes without one of the mics plugged in, so this is going to be a rough ride.
It's even rougher because I did, in fact, used to be an audio tech.
We didn't go 5 minutes. We went a solid minute before realizing that someone wasn't
Okay,
plugged
all
in.
hyperbole aside, it was like 10 seconds, and then I scrolled back and I noticed that there was no level on one of them, and
This is the show
I
where
stopped.
we talk censored stories and people sensible solutions and common ground movements to fight and build,
and sometimes other stuff.
such as what's going on with our microphones. We are part of the Popular Resistance Podcast Network, which you should definitely check out. You can find it everywhere, and there's other great shows on there as well. But we have a lot of shit coming up here in this show. We're going to talk about Lula da Silva getting free. We're going to talk about what's going on in Bolivia. We're going to get in real quickly into Trump impeachment hearings, Michael Bloomberg jumping into the race. What the flying fuck? And all that and plenty more. So that's just a little sampling. But let's get started here. So we'll start with the good news before getting into the pretty awful news. Lula da Silva has gone free finally in Brazil, and I don't blame people for not necessarily following Brazilian politics that much, but they have a completely fascist president now named Jair Bolsonaro, and just a total horror show of a man. And Lula da Silva was locked up under the guise of a corruption investigation and court proceedings, and then Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept revealed many of the texts and everything showing that his prosecution, da Silva's, Lula's, was fraudulent and rigged, and the judge was working with the prosecution, which is supposed to be illegal, and blah, blah, blah.
And he had a gag order on him during much of his time in jail, which was 580 days in prison.
Right, they wouldn't even let him speak to the press because
Right.
Here's the thing, is this guy from prison was going to win the presidency. And so they had to make sure that he was convicted of something and therefore could not run. And that was the only way they were able to get Bolsonaro, push this fascist leader into office. And the U.S., I don't think we played that large of a role, but we're certainly supportive. The Wall Street Journal endorsed Bolsonaro. Trump said, he's a great guy. You definitely have our fingerprints kind of all over this shit, trying to make sure that the more left-wing Lula, he's not like he's not Fidel Castro or something, but he is left-wing especially compared to Bolsonaro. And anyway, because this corruption was all revealed, he's gone free.
Yeah, and he's wasted no time in getting to work. His party has announced that he's already planning trips around the country, and that his first real large objective is to regain power for the forces of the left in the municipal elections, which will happen next October. And so he's certainly wasting no time after being freed from prison. And this is a really interesting time in particular because Bolsonaro's his approval rating has plummeted to around 30%. So it could be a very powerful time to bring in the left forces. And again, as you noted, da Silva's not he's not a socialist behemoth or anything. A lot of people have pointed out some neoliberal policies of his. But the point is that he is a leftist force. So the fact is that Bolsonaro, who is an outright fascist and has said so proudly and has publicly stated that he wants to commit genocide against the native peoples, the indigenous peoples of Brazil.
And in a lot of ways, they're kind of doing that with, he's encouraging all those fires you hear about in the Amazon. He's encouraging those because it destroys the indigenous way of life, possibly kills them, and allows for more farming by people who are not indigenous.
Not to mention life in general, because as people have pointed out, the Amazon rainforest is vital to life on Earth, as well as being the most biodiverse region in the world. So So yeah, all of this put together means that this is really, really good news, and it means that we should keep an eye on what's going on in Brazil, not least of all how the U.S. will respond, because as we know, Jair Bolsonaro would not be in power were it not for the U.S. And people like the Duque in Colombia would not be in power were it not for the U.S. Even Piñera in Chile, the protests that are ongoing in Chile, which I'll be talking about in my episode this coming week, would not be in power were it not for us.
Act out.
So we really need to keep an eye on this because the U.S. has a vested interest in keeping a literal fascist, in power rather than someone like Lula. So we really need to keep an eye on that.
And that is the perfect segue to our fingerprints again in Bolivia, which, another country that now Evo Morales, far more left-wing than even Lula, and he's been in power for a while now, and he's part of what they consider the pink tide, which is a move towards many socialist ideas and things like that, helping everybody, bringing people out of poverty, nationalizing. Evo Morales nationalized the fossil fuels in Bolivia. So what does that mean? Well, of course, the U.S. fucking hates him and wants to do everything to help undermine him. So if you want to go into what's going on down there.
Yeah, so, and this is
we're past the good news fast. I hope you enjoyed it. We coasted through, although I feel like we focused more on the fascist side of things, but that was the good news. Lula's free.
Because that's how we roll.
So put your pom-poms away. You can let your little blowhorn, what are the things called with party poppers? Like the, where the thing unravels as you blow into it. Woo!
I don't know what that's called. I
Like
just know it has to do
like
with
a
New
party
Year's.
horn thing. Anyway, you can let that go limp. So time to let that go limp. And,
we need more sound effects on this show.
You want a slide whistle?
I just something. We need a sound effects bank is really what I'm saying.
All right. Every time you say fascist, I'll go.
I feel like that's a little too happy. I think it should be a downturn at the end. Yeah, that's the fascist sound. There we go. Thank you. Fascist. There we go. I'm just testing you. All right. Yep, this is going to be a loopy one. Anyway, so the president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, has resigned, and this is breaking news. We're recording this on Sunday, November 10th, and this is just coming in today. So basically, what happened is that there were elections on October 20th in Bolivia. And Evo Morales won, but since his win, there have been extreme right-wing protests and violence in the streets.
Claiming it wasn't legit.
Right. And if Evo Morales, by the way, is part of a party called Movement Towards Socialism, or MAS. And Bolivia is a predominantly indigenous nation. And the MAS is part of the indigenous social movement, towards socialism.
And he was the first indigenous president of Bolivia.
Right. And interestingly enough, little fun fact here, Bolivia is ranked first, I believe, in South America, but possibly other places as well, when it comes to gross national happiness.
Really?
Which is, if measured by human happiness, Bolivia ranks highest in the hemisphere.
They're not beating Bhutan, are they?
Well, that's not the same hemisphere.
Fair point. But I was just
I
asking.
I don't know.
Because Bhutan was the one that came up with gross domestic happiness, I think.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know, but that's just a little fun fact for you. And another interesting point is that Evo Morales is also a survivor of brutalization by the troops of, drumroll please, that's not a drumroll.
That's all I had, though. It's the only tool I got over here.
Of the DEA, the U.S.
Really?
DEA. When he was a union leader, before he was president, they badly beat him and apparently left him for dead, and they thought he was dead. And his neighbors were brutalized and raped by soldiers, homes set ablaze. Small coca farmers in the region tell the explained that the United States wanted to eradicate the poor, but not the drug trade, because the oligarchy was deeply enmeshed in international cocaine trafficking. And the U.S. worked with them because we need our cocaine.
As we do. So
that's just a little
he,
backstory there.
So why is he stepping down? Well, he says it's because he wants to see the violence end. He wants to see his brothers and sisters no longer being beaten in the streets. It does seem, I mean, I don't know. Maybe more will come out as the days go on, but it does seem like this violent right-wing, fascist mobs were gaining traction, and it is possible that he was just worried about the amount of bloodshed that could continue. But maybe we'll find out more. I don't know.
So basically, what happened with this? With Evo Morales stepping down is that he's trying to, as you pointed out, Lee, he's trying to mitigate the violence. But already during the elections, October 20th, the opposition had said pretty much straightforward, we're going to launch a coup if Morales wins. And this is not anything new. Since Mas came to power, and this is, I think it's like 14 years that they've been in power after being democratically elected into power, which because of the legislation that they've put forward, the poverty that they've been able to eradicate, the nationalization of things that you mentioned, Lee. So this is nothing new. They've dealt with this before, and the U.S. is, of course, again, intricately tied to this. And it was actually the OAS that announced that they found problems. They found irregularities in the votes after the election on October 20th. And remember, OAS is the same entity. It's the Organization of American States that basically said, Organization of American States, yes, that basically announced that they recognize Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela, and they wholeheartedly stood behind the economic warfare that the U.S. was pummeling Venezuela with. So that's who the OAS is. The OAS is basically an imperialist arm in South America.
Right. So it's a union of basically the countries that we have either aligned with, the U.S. has, or we support, or we have puppet governments installed there. That's basically who the OAS is. And yeah, this all reeks of, even without having much more information, I haven't read extensively on Bolivia, but it just reeks of the exact same thing they tried to do in Venezuela and they've done in various other countries, Haiti. Morales, they tried to make sure Morales would not win this election. He then scrapes through and wins it, and they help fund and create a coup that either you're going to end up with him violently cracking down to try and stop it, in which case you're killing your own people, or you end up with the right wing winning like this, or in Venezuela's case, you ended up with so many people standing up for Maduro that it ultimately fizzled.
Right, and there have been violent clashes between Morales' supporters and the extreme right wing in the streets, and I believe that as a leader, Morales is also trying to avoid that sort of mayhem and that bloodshed. But this is certainly not good news. And Morales asked the OAS to show proof of their, these quote unquote irregularities in the vote, and they have not come forward with any of that. And he also offered to put up new elections instead, and that was also completely ignored, and the violence just continued to ramp up. So I think that he really felt that this was his last remaining option, and it's really fucking sad to see this because, again, Morales has been incredibly instrumental in pushing Bolivia forward in terms of their autonomy, their self-determination, and again, their quality of life.
Nationalized the fossil fuels. Like, that's a big step to people benefiting from the fossil fuel exploitation. Obviously, I'd love for there to be zero, but as long as it's going to happen, I would rather the money go to the people than go to a tiny number of the oligarchy. And that is, Evo Morales has said, the oligarchy is the right-wing oligarchy is the ones forcing him out. And he also has brought tons of people, a large percentage of Bolivia out of poverty. So, as people don't know these numbers because they're not allowed to be reported in the U.S., but it's very similar to what went on in Venezuela with Chavez. 50% of people were brought up, decreased poverty by 50%, decreased extreme poverty by 70% in Venezuela. I mean, those are numbers that you just don't see in countries, and it's just an extreme, bringing up and of the poorest people, allowing them to have a standard of living that's much better, and
it's
course,
also
never
important
reported.
to point out, because again, this is not stuff that you're going to hear about, but Bolivia has done things that we have only dreamed about. First of all, I'd like to just point out again that our constitution is 200 plus years old, and it was written by white slave owning men. So let's just put that out there first.
Also, they put a man on Venus, which we were not able to accomplish.
Bolivia rewrote their constitution and enshrined natural rights, basically giving nature equal rights to humans in their constitution. And this was in 2011. 2009, after basically that was when their new constitution passed, it greatly expanded the rights for the indigenous majority, and it basically, which was again under Evo Morales, and they basically made sure that there were broader access to basic services such as education and healthcare, and it expanded the role of the state in the management of natural resources and the economy. So this is the kind of shit that, we talk about, right? We're like, oh, the Green New Deal, which again does not give nature or ecosystems equal rights to humans, which it should. But this is the kind of shit that we're not even at the level of fucking talking about in this country.
Right.
The actually talking about it in a legislative capacity. And this is the shit that Bolivia has already done.
Well, we don't have an indigenous leader, for one.
No, we don't. So it's very important that we understand this, because only by understanding the structure of Bolivia, what Bolivia has actually been able to do with their indigenous leadership, can we understand why the U.S. government hates them so much, and why the U.S. government is pushing for someone like Morales to leave so that somebody right-wing, like a Bolsonaro, can come in, privatize those same resources, pull those resources away from the predominantly indigenous populace, and make sure that all of those resources, all of the profit from those resources, are funneling north to the U.S. and partner countries like Brazil, as opposed to going to the people who have lived and cared for that land since time immemorial.
Well said. And we're about to get to Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump here in a second, and much more. But I just want to stop for a second and say that this show is completely funded by you over at patreon.com/commoncensored. There are no ads. There are no sponsors. It's just all you guys. So if you're getting $1 worth or more out of this episode, please go to patreon.com/commoncensored. Sign up there. You can get all of Eleanor's work, her videos, weekly TV show, her writing, all of it at artkillingapathy.com. Don't miss out on any of her stuff. YouTube.com/redacted tonight if you want to see my show. And I'm trying to get everybody to not just click subscribe, because they unsubscribe people, but also next to the subscribe button, you have to click the bell. And there's a little bell there, and you have to click on all, or else they won't email you to tell you I have new videos. So please do that, even if you're already a subscriber. And let's see here. We're always taking comments and topic ideas. We often use your topic ideas. commoncensored@protonmail.com is where you can email. And lastly, head on over to patreon.com/commoncensored. And, real quick. Sorry. Wait, 1 second. Okay, I got it. The date's already in stone. We're playing Philadelphia, January 25th. I know this is ahead of time, but I figured I'll throw them out there anyway. Dallas, and then I'm playing Dallas and Austin, February 28th and 29th. Eleanor will be joining me in Philadelphia. This, at least some of these dates, the February ones definitely, will be part of my new book tour.
Woo!
Don't worry, the book is not out for pre-sale yet. Probably, hopefully next week.
Don't worry?
Well, no,
What does that mean?
don't worry, you're not missing out.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry, everybody. The world's not ending because my book's on pre-sale. Next week I will probably be announcing the pre-sale website if you want to grab that. All right. I didn't tell everybody where to go to see those tickets. That's leecamp.com/schedule is where you can
Schedule,
find
if you will.
Schedule if you're British and pronounce things weirdly. Okay. Oh, my God. You know they call little sugar packets satchels?
Of course they do.
Satchels of
they do.
sugar. That's fucking adorable.
Yes.
I saw because I once played a video clip of they had a Coke. I think he was the CEO of like the UK Coke division, and they had him on, one of the big primetime news shows. And the guy brings out and he goes, "This cup of Coke has this many satchels of sugar," and he has like a bucket of sugar there. And of course, it's awesome because the guy's completely caught off guard. He's like, people drink what they want, blah, blah. And that was
you
awesome.
just know that in the back of his head, he's like, satchels?
Well, no, he was British too, so he probably loved it.
Damn.
But no, in my mind, I was just like, satchels! But yeah, it was good to see a Coke CEO collapse on air. Okay, let's get to some of the news that Eleanor especially hates covering, all of the topical shits on our mainstream media.
Well, topical, it makes it sound like
it's not topical. Yeah, it's not just topical. I get what you're saying.
I say again.
You just hate the politics of, the soap opera of politics.
The tit for tat fucking
and I agree.
Sandbox
I
fight.
agree.
It's
I
like
agree.
watching two fucking kids yell at each other about who stole whose cookie. It's just, I don't enjoy watching it.
I largely agree, and that's why we make it a quick segment. It's just a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, so that you don't get too upset. But if we don't talk about it, then everyone thinks that we are unaware of what's going on, what people think is going on in the world, what they've been told to care about. They don't understand why we're not talking about it. So the big news on the Democratic side, which I'll be talking more extensively about this in a moment of clarity, so we'll just hit on it real quick, is that Michael Bloomberg, the New York billionaire, has something like $50 billion. Says, he's like the mascot for Wall Street. He is Wall Street. He should just walk around dressed like a wall because he is fucking Wall Street.
Or the bull.
He's already filing the paperwork, so it seems very likely he's going to get into the race. He claims he's maybe not even going to do debates. He's just going to fund millions upon millions of dollars of ads for himself. And he says it's because there are not any good candidates, or not enough good candidates on the Democratic side. So please allow the out-of-touch former Republican billionaire to solve things for the Democratic Party. And the number of Democrats on these mainstream networks who seem to think this is a good idea is fucking revolting. Are you a fan of
to be
Michael
fair,
Bloomberg?
he was also an independent.
Yeah, at one point.
So,
At one
come
point he was
on,
independent.
be fair.
Republican for a long time, then independent. Really, it's not him that shifted. It's the system that shifted. He used to, in order to have the views he has, which are like, you should be gouged for health care, you should not tax billionaires, all that shit, that used to be Republican. Now, that's Democrat.
I just have, so what there's a lot I don't understand because I'm not a fucking billionaire, so I don't think like one, thank fucking Christ, or someone. I don't understand why you wouldn't just pour billions of dollars behind someone else.
That's what I was wondering too, and I actually was thinking that here's the more Machiavellian side of me, was thinking that maybe that is what he's going to do. Is that here's the thing. If you don't get into the race, the only way to pour like literally $1 billion, hundreds of millions, is to give to super PACs. And it gets complicated, and the super PAC decides what to do, not you. You don't get to be a dictator about where your money goes and things like that. So whereas if he's in the race and he just spends hundreds of millions of dollars, let's say trashing Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, that would prop up Biden, and maybe he can pretend it's for him. So basically he could do ads that just help Joe Biden, spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and not actually be running.
I would love to see that ad. Like, what would
trashing Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren?
No. Like, I'm trying to imagine an ad that's for him as president, but propping up
No, you don't. You don't say, because a lot of these ads are just attack ads. So he wouldn't even have to. All he'd have to say, maybe at the end, is Michael Bloomberg approved this message or whatever. But it could just be an ad talking about Bernie Sanders, socialist. Elizabeth Warren wants to break up your childhood's face, like whatever the fuck. It doesn't have to be about Bloomberg. It could just be trashing them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it remains to be seen. It just seems like a lot of effort. I mean, I'm sure he's not the one putting in the fucking hours filling out the paperwork. He has people who have people who have people to do that. But still, I don't quite understand, and especially at this stage,
Even though that was my Machiavellian theory, I actually think he just thinks he might have a chance at buying this election, which, if Biden collapses, Bernie Sanders is never talked about on our mainstream media. Elizabeth Warren, which the mainstream media initially propped up because they wanted her to pull votes from Bernie Sanders. Now they're starting to get a little scared that she might be good enough to win. And you and I have criticized heavily Elizabeth Warren. There's a million things to have a ton of problems with her about, Pow Wow Chow being the least of them. Her incredibly, seemingly racist Indian cookbook that she put out. But they don't like her stance on breaking up the big tech companies and breaking up the big banks. And so she is slightly threatening to the status quo. And they propped her up initially because they wanted her to siphon votes from Bernie Sanders. But now she's competitive. And they don't like that the two of the three winning people, two of the top three, and really the only competitive ones, are her, Bernie Sanders, and Biden. And Biden, his eye is exploding. His teeth are falling out. He's doing speeches facing the wrong direction. Like, he's a fucking catastrophe. And he's in the center of the impeachment.
Well, okay.
Fucking corruption.
Final question before we move on to something wildly more interesting and important. Not
so much.
Should we care? So here's the thing. When I remember whenever this was, we were watching the second Democratic debate and we had some friends over basically to sit and make fun of it while eating pizza. That was basically the point of the evening. But
vegan pizza.
Well, I wasn't eating vegan pizza, but sure. So somebody made the point that's like, and the interesting thing here is that most of these people are not even going to fucking matter in a few months because there are like 40 people in the debates, and then in a few months it's going to be whittled down. So that's basically the question, is that because of our news cycle, I get that, we need to address this, we need to talk about, and if nothing else, talk about how sick it is that a billionaire can just insert himself into a race and think that he has a chance just because he's a billionaire. Yes, I think that needs to be mentioned. But ultimately, do we need to care about this? Because is it going to matter two shits in a few months when he kind of fades into the background?
Well, I think you and I have talked a lot about how the presidency doesn't matter as much as we think it does. There's been basically a coup on foreign policy. It is run by our military-industrial complex. It is not run by the president. Congress hardly even approves of most of the things that have anything to do with our military. So we've talked about how the presidency doesn't matter as much as we think. We've talked about how these primaries, which the DNC has openly said they can rig and will rig again, they don't matter as much as we think. Even if they weren't rigged, we're talking about fucking 12 votes, or let's be honest, 1,200 votes in Iowa are going to decide who wins that state, and then 1,200 votes in New Hampshire. So really, you're talking a few thousand people in Iowa and New Hampshire are going to ultimately decide who this presidential candidate is. And so the answer to your question is no. This does not matter that much. But does it matter 4 minutes out of our podcast? I'd say yes.
It's been more than 4.
5?
Let's move on.
Okay. Are you angry with me for bringing it up?
No, I'm just bored.
Okay. Fine. Well, then you'll like our next story.
I only do this because it's fun. I don't do this because I care about the topics. So you should know that.
Well, these are our quick hits, all right? Specifically, not just for you, but for me. I don't fucking want to talk about them either. All right. This is another story you'll love. Donald Trump impeachment hearing. It was like a balloon deflating right there.
Yes, that's how I feel.
All right, quick. We'll give this 3 minutes. We give the last one 4 minutes. I don't know.
Exactly. That's all there is to say.
No, it's all right. Here's what I was saying to you earlier today. There are, and I might try and do this better for Redacted Tonight soon, but the factions of power in this country are the elite Republicans, meaning those Republicans that are in our federal government, but really just a top echelon. The elite Democrats, again, in our Congress, but mainly just the top echelon. Then you've got the deep state, which is the military intelligence apparatus. This is Pentagon, CIA, NSA, all of them. And then you have kind of the Trump world, because most of them are not the elite Republicans. Sure, Mitch McConnell helps Trump at times, but most of the Republican Party are not huge Trump fans. So I'd say there's kind of this Trump Republican world that is a side balloon off the actual Republicans, not really liked by most of them. And so most of the power factions in Washington of the U.S. government, which, let's be honest, is the government that continues to try to own the world, is against the Trump presidency. Not because they think he's doing positive things or because because of even this Ukraine call and they forcing Ukraine to announce an investigation into Joe Biden. That's not even the real reason. The real reason is because A, he occasionally pushes against the military-industrial complex, which is not okay. And more importantly, I'd say, he is revealing the presidency for what it is. He is revealing the corruption. He doesn't know he's revealing the corruption, but he is. He says on Fox News, there's a lot of pressure on me to create war. That has never been said by a president on fucking television. He's got people like John Bolton saying on Fox News, we're going into Venezuela to get the oil. That has never been said by a former president, or past presidents. And the list goes on. He calls out the media. He calls out the FBI and the CIA, and many of these things are true. It's coming from a known liar, but many of these things are true, and it's why they have concocted a reason to force him out.
Sure, and of course that is blatantly clear by what they've chosen to go after him on, right? Because there's so much that they could go after him on, and okay. So all joking aside, all sound effects aside, the reason that you'll never see me at an impeachment protest, unless I'm protesting the impeachment shenanigans, the reason that you'll never see me there is because it's a waste of fucking time. It's like when they protested the Protect Mueller shit with this whole Russiagate nonsense. It's because it's a waste of time. It is the power elite playing, again, sandbox arguments between themselves because they can't actually, the Democrats know that they can't actually go after Trump on anything substantive because it would mean that they'd have to go after themselves. It's the same reason that the Democrats never bring up shit like interstate cross-check or the fact that Black and Latinx folks are being struck from voter rolls and kept from voting because they know if they had to go after the Republicans for fucking up our elections, they'd have to reckon with their own fucking up of our elections.
Right.
So they're never going to go after Trump on something that would potentially benefit the people. That is the bottom line here. Nothing that benefits the people will ever come from impeachment proceedings in this system, precisely because anything that would benefit the people would not benefit those in power. So they would never go that route because they don't want to fuck themselves over. So that is why this whole fucking fiasco is an incredible waste of time, and why I will very vehemently and radically and vocally and dramatically oppose this shit at every fucking turn because we are on fire, like literally and figuratively on fire, and this is a colossal waste of fucking time. And that is why I kind of make these sound effects and shit, because I'm frustrated that fellow radicals and fellow leftists
right now
are wasting time on this shit.
It's important. What you're saying right now is important.
I do think it's important.
So that's a reason to talk about it. It's just so you can say that. I'm serious.
Fair enough.
That wasn't a joke.
No, fair enough. But yes, I mean, this is why I think I'm done.
I think you got it off your chest. No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I'll go even a step further. Part of the reason to even talk about all this, not for us, but for the mainstream media, is to cover over all of the things that could actually help people, is to cover over the fact that before this impeachment hearing discussion began, we were talking about this country was actually having a discussion about Medicare for all, having a discussion about, teacher strikes and things, because that was the news. They didn't know how to cover it over, and now they found their way. This is the cover up for all of those discussions, and also let's put in a billionaire into the race so that he can talk about how we don't need healthcare.
Yep.
Okay, so speaking of teacher strikes, let's get to those.
Yeah, speaking of which, So basically, I wanted to, because I saw a few articles about the power of teachers, and I wanted to touch on that because teacher strikes are something that have popped up around the country the past year or so, and I think it's really important to look at these not just for what they are at face value, but for what they can be and have been on a deeper level. So for instance, the Chicago teachers strike, which ended just last week, really. A lot of people are pointing at it and say, well, they didn't get everything they asked for, so does that mean it's a failure? No, because first of all, are they coming for you, Lee?
The sirens in the background. It sounds like a fire engine. So if a fire engine's coming for me, then I'm really in trouble.
Well, better get that looked at. Anyway, so...
it burns when I pee. Can I call the fire department because it burns when I pee?
I'm willing to bet you that somebody has. So first of all, the Chicago walkout, the teacher walkout, lasted longer than the city's landmark 2012 strike, and it also lasted longer than the walkout in Los Angeles and Oakland that happened earlier this year. So the fact that they didn't get everything that they had asked for.
Well, do you know some of the things they were demanding?
Yeah, so they were, just like a lot of other teacher strikes, they were demanding a lot of things, and a lot of them had to do with things outside of the typical ask of a higher wage or, better work environment. One of the things here was that they were asking for smaller class sizes. Another thing that they had asked for that they didn't get was a housing assistance for new teachers. But one of the things that they did win with regards to social justice issues was a new guarantee for bilingual education, including more dedicated teachers for English language learners and a declaration that Chicago schools are sanctuary spaces. And that's huge. And another thing that they did win was that school districts now are required to put a nurse and a social worker in every school within 5 years. It allocates $35 million more annually to reduce overcrowded classrooms. And both unions also won pay bumps for support staff who have made poverty wages. So, yeah, I mean, even though they didn't win everything that they were asking for, these are actually huge wins. And it sounds sick to say that actually just having a fucking nurse at a school is a huge win. But hey, everyone, that's the state of our fucking schools.
Because, as I recall, kids puke a lot. Like a lot.
And that's the only reason you have a nurse.
There is like daily puking going on. And I don't know if it's the content we're being taught. You're told Columbus is a great guy and you just can't keep it down. Like, I could see that. But, and then when they don't even deal with the puke very well. They cover it in like that sawdust shit, which is not... It just looks like somebody
went to a fascinating school.
Working on. No, this is all American schools. You might have been in Sweden at the time, but they come around and they sprinkle sawdust over the puke, and then it just looks like someone was building.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. Someone was building a bookshelf, and the bookshelf puked. Like it looks very odd. No.
I honestly don't know if you're joking.
I'm not joking.
You're not joking at all right now.
Well, the bookshelf did not puke. That part was a joke. The rest was true.
Wait, sawdust.
Yeah, they cover in sawdust. Yeah.
What the fuck is this?
I know. We live in
the Great Depression.
We live in ancient times in this world.
Can someone email us and corroborate this? Because I honestly I don't.
We don't need a fucking email. All right. A, I remember. B, when I would tour the colleges, because through most of my 20s I played colleges, I would always tell a joke about how when you puke in school they just covered in sawdust, and everyone laughed because everyone knew exactly what I was fucking talking about. So this has been corroborated by many an audience.
I'm literally speechless, which is really terrible for a podcast. Anyway, that wasn't... Wow, okay.
I'd like to say I got us off track, but I argue that was on track.
Yeah, no, in Sweden, they don't cover it in sawdust.
Which is odd because they have IKEA. They've got a lot of sawdust sitting around.
You know what?
Good old,
I take pride in my
good old IKEA reference.
In my shitty furniture. So the important, and besides these wins, again, just like with other teacher strikes, what's really powerful about teacher strikes is they're an incredible intersection of issues. So one of the things that, and it's really hard to argue, because while somebody could argue like, oh, fuck you, you work at Amazon, like that was your choice. These people are shaping children's minds. They're caring for people's children more than a lot of people have time to care for their own children. So they're literally raising America's children. And so it's really hard to argue with them when they say things that are necessary for a child, right?
Problem is a lot of them, they're raising American children, R-A-Z-I-N-G. They're just breaking them all down.
And building them up as good, dutiful proles. But for the teachers, for a lot of these teachers that are part of these unions and are, not all of them are like anarcho-syndicalists or anything, but like a lot of these teachers are really progressive because, the more you know, the more left you are.
Reality has a well-known left-wing bias.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really highlighted in these teacher strikes was the fact that there's plenty of wealth in the city of Chicago in order to invest in schools and public services and, highlight public services there, because that's also something that they were talking about. I mentioned housing. It's just that the wealth is concentrated, a microcosm of this country. It's concentrated in the wrong hands and at the top. And they also...
Yeah, it shouldn't be concentrated in any hands.
They highlighted...
It should be more diffuse.
They highlighted places that a lot of these funds are going, like the police, which if you follow, some of the police accountability and brutality stories in this country, Chicago is a prime example of police brutality.
They had a black torture site.
Yeah.
And as in a mysterious dark torture site that came out a few years ago. We covered it on Redacted, but it was covered in a lot of news places that Chicago literally had their own, like a black site is something the CIA fucking does for their so-called, terrorists that they ship off to the middle of Afghanistan and then torture them there. And cops were doing it in Chicago. Literally a black site where they would take prisoners they didn't want anyone to find, so that family would go to the precincts and say, where's so-and-so, my son, my husband, whatever. And well, we don't know. Oh, he's been transferred. Oh, and he's in a fucking black site within Chicago limits being basically tortured. I mean, sometimes the torture was just locking him in a cage and not giving him food and water and shit, but basically being tortured.
But still, we're disappearing people.
For fucking days or weeks on end. It's like, what the fuck is this country?
That's where the money is going, not the education system. And again, this highlights the issue of the school to prison pipeline, right? The issue of funneling funds to imprison kids as opposed to educating them. And of course, another part of this was that the teachers union was also partnering with a larger coalition that was fighting to tax corporations and luxury real estate at a higher rate in order to fund affordable housing.
God forbid.
And public mental health clinics and other public services. And actually, what happened during one of the strikes was that 9 CTU members were arrested at the headquarters of Sterling Bay to protest Chicago's decision to award a Wall Street-backed developer more than $1 billion worth of TIF subsidies. And TIF subsidies, they're known as tax increment financing. And excuse me, I know that's like super boring, but stay with me here. Basically, the TIF, all right, thank you, Sleepy. No, I didn't say fascist. You can't make the fascist sound. So tax increment financing, the concept behind this is that it's intended to funnel property tax dollars to quote unquote blighted areas, aka read predominantly poor and black and brown. But basically what Chicago, and Chicago's not alone, a lot of cities have done this, instead of awarding the TIF money to quote unquote blighted areas or purposefully poor areas, they've awarded them to places like, Wall Street backed developers, $1 billion worth of TIF subsidies.
Anna, do you think those people have some sort of connection to the politicians? Is that why this
No,
happened?
I don't know why you'd say that.
Oh.
I
wonder why
I don't think
they
there's
got
anything
awarded.
to suggest that the only reason that they're getting money for poor people is because they're literally taking these people out to
taking the
$1,000 lunches.
Yeah.
But yeah, so instead of going to revitalize communities, this money is going to develop luxury condos and shit. And the teachers were shedding light on this. The 9 CTU members, Chicago Teachers Union members, were arrested.
Oh my God,
for protesting this.
That might be the best threat in a situation like this, where a union is up against a well-known official, such as the head of the schools or a mayor or something. And what if they just said, hey, each day you don't work out a deal with us, we're going to come forward and report true news, but it'll be covered on national news because it's part of this massive strike.
Dude.
So tomorrow we're going to talk about the black sites here, but that the police have going here in Chicago, and we'll see what the day after that is.
Well, and actually, that's a good point.
Does that count as blackmail? You're relaying the truth.
Right. And actually, that's a good point, because it kind of segues into the next story about the power of teachers, which was basically, which comes from the climate movement, the youth-led climate movement. And this story comes out of Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Teachers Association, which is the teachers union in Massachusetts, basically released it introduced a resolution that said that it was going to support the youth climate strike. And this is a union of, hundreds of thousands. I think it's something 110,000 people that basically said, we support the youth-led climate strike.
Right, which some people were trying to pit teachers against the students by saying the students were walking out of school, so they're not getting their education, and shouldn't the education system hate this? And so this was a step in the opposite direction for these teachers to say, no, we're with the kids.
Right, and once again, it shows the intersections not only of the fact that, of course, these kids are, interacting with these teachers every day, but it also shows the power of educating kids about climate change. When I was recently in
it's too depressing. You can't tell them.
When I was recently in West Virginia, folks were telling me that the legislators in West Virginia have pushed very hard to keep climate change and science in general, including shit like evolution, out of classrooms because, kids don't need that. That's not necessary for a child's education.
They're going to need evolution soon because it's going to be hot as fucking blazes outside, and they better
evolve.
We better evolve parasols out of the top of our heads or something.
That really goes doubly for me because I was really not I was not manufactured for the age of climate change. I can go ahead and tell you it's going to be rough for me. Send parasols.
She's an ice princess, but she's trying to bring back the parasol, so.
Not that that's going to help me when I'm on fire, because I think parasols are quite flammable.
Well, you just spray it with some flame retardant, and but yeah, you look like a little bit like Michael Jackson walking around.
You know what? I don't care.
You got on lace gloves.
That's fine. That's totally fine. I don't even care. So basically, the gist of these stories is the power not only of strikes, because strikes are incredibly powerful, just because we as workers, regardless of which industry you are in, we are the ones who propel this system forward. And there's a lot of heaviness in recognizing that in terms of what that system represents and what it does. But there's also a lot of power there. And when we recognize that power, we recognize that power in our workplaces, in our communities, we can grind shit to a halt. And when grinding shit to a halt includes what people depend on in terms of childcare, because remember, schools are not just where people go to educate their kids. That's childcare for people who have to work.
Jobs, yeah.
Even if you have quote unquote that nuclear family, show me an American family today where both people don't have to work. And I'm not talking billionaires, I'm talking regular people where both parents don't have to work at least a job each. And so this is where the kids go for childcare, after school programs and shit shit like that.
Right.
So this is a huge intersection that really cuts into people's lives in a very deep way. And when you add to that the intersection of housing, of policing, of public projects and things like healthcare, you are really incorporating the entire socio-political life of these communities, of these cities, and that's something that's very powerful that teachers have been able to really encapsulate and incorporate into their strikes.
Well, that's why I say we need to bring back arcades as a form of daycare. Like really big ones, like, because, you could leave a kid with skee ball for hours on end.
You know what's sad
he'd
is
be
that
fine.
there might be people listening to this who never actually went to an arcade.
Never went to an arcade?
I mean, have you seen an arcade recently? They don't exist anymore.
But there's some games that weren't about just video. There's like the fucking one where the claw never picks up the stuffed animal. Can't you do
Did anybody actually do that? I swear, every time I went to an arcade, there was always
Yeah.
dust on those fuckers. I
Oh
never
my
actually
God,
saw.
I played it a million times.
That explains a lot.
And I won 0 stuffed animals. Oh, there was one time I found out I could reach my arm in the slot, and I stole a stuffed animal that way.
Wow, you must have tiny arms.
At the time, I did.
Although I was a fat kid, so that explains why that never worked for me.
At the time, very tiny arms. And then they invented a new thing where when you reach in there, it lops off your arm. So it doesn't work as well as it used to, because I was telling everybody about it, and now there's just a pile of arms, kid arms, at the bottom of that machine. A guy has to come by once a week to clean it out.
See, I liked the analog games, like what do you call that? The air hockey.
Oh, where you throw the puck with your hand?
No, you have the little.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Little,
Oh my God, I love that thing. And you could actually take off somebody's finger with that shit.
Oh
Because
my
if
God,
that
you
thing
throw your
hit
back into that thing? Oh yeah, you lose a finger. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But there should be games where you can lose a finger. I think that it teaches you it gets you ready for life. Hey, things will lop off your finger.
I was just telling you the
ready.
other day that and I hope my parents are listening to this, where my brother used to play baseball, there was like a jungle gym that was made out of like the hardest steel.
Oh, yeah. It's just cement and steel.
It was made out of like fucking mithril, whatever the elves make. Like that shit was just
and lead paint chips.
Yes, and that's why that explains a lot.
So
Yeah. But hold on, because it was constructed by somebody who didn't understand.
By the way, her brother's no longer living. He died back in the day from the jungle gym.
No, because he was playing baseball. I was the one playing on the jungle gym because he was playing baseball and I would be at the games. But I didn't want to watch because who wants to watch fucking middle school baseball? So I would go play on the jungle gym. But whoever created the jungle gym didn't understand proportions of children. So the monkey bars were like a fucking mile high. So I would just ask passersby
random people
to help to lift me up so that I could
can
get
you
on the
please
monkey
lift
bars.
Me? See, nowadays no man walking by would ever do that. He'd be like, I'm not fucking touching you. I don't know what kind of fucking lawyers you have in your family. You lift your own goddamn self up though.
You know, I actually saw a sign at a San Francisco, what do you call them? Like jungle gym area, which are now made out of like basically foam. They're so adorable and soft and plush.
Squishy. Yeah, the whole thing's squishy.
The whole thing's squishy. But it said all adults must be accompanied by a child. It was such a cute sign. I was like, I think just a lot of places should have those because that's just adorable.
I mean, as I say in my stand-up act nowadays, that those jungle gyms, those bare knuckle back alley jungle gyms that were public and everyone free to use, they were important for us. We learned how to live life without our front teeth, which I think is it's an important thing. It's an important step.
Anyway,
right,
we should move on.
We got time for one last story. Do you want to talk about Israel and the UN, or do you want to talk about F-35 helmets?
You know, I think we should leave on a sort of absurdist note, so let's talk about the helmets.
All right, we'll go to the helmets, and then we'll do the Israel and the UN for the extra content. But the F-35, which I imagine everyone knows what the fuck these things are now. They are the largest fucking... It's money laundering. It's money laundering on the scale of trillions of dollars to the weapons contractors. And they've been building this thing for decades, this fighter jet that is supposed to be above and beyond all other fighter jets. And while we've been building this, China's just figured out a way to hack all our computers. So we're going to be flying around in the sky acting like we have dominance while we're just fucked. But it is supposed to be the most sophisticated jet ever, but every time they test it, it just like catches fire on the tarmac.
It just breaks.
And so the latest thing, and they've spent literally over $1 trillion on this thing. Like each jet costs, I don't even know what it is, tens of millions or something. It's like an insane amount of money.
Each the unit price for an F-35, including the aircraft engine,
And what about the little snacks, little pretzels on board?
That's going to cost you extra.
Okay.
But this is like no frills. This is not with like the MP3 player.
Yeah, no bathroom.
No, this is just straight up is $89.2 million.
$89 million
a piece.
A jet.
For
Per
a
jet.
giant hunk of metal that
Per
does
jet.
not fucking work.
And you know what the going rate on one of the human pilots is? $10. They are willing to allot for that pilot.
The pretzels are actually more expensive.
Pretzels are you got to upsell the pretzels. But so speaking of that, $89 million jet, how much do you think the helmet the dude wears, or female dude, wears in this jet? How much? $400,000 for a fucking helmet that somebody's gonna walk off with. Some guy's gonna leave his own helmet on the seat and then walk off with the $400,000.
Does that helmet give blowjobs? Like, why is it that expensive?
It does. It gives virtual reality blowjobs. But the reason this is in the news now is because they think they may have finally found a fix to the bug in the helmet that was causing it to make it impossible for pilots to see at low altitudes.
So you're telling me that not only was the plane shitty, the helmet was also shitty?
Yes, the helmet was
Wow.
crap. Because the reason this is such a sophisticated helmet is it gives the pilot virtual reality, and all of the readings and everything that he needs to see while he's flying are like floating in midair in his eyesight as he flies.
Isn't that super annoying?
Probably. But you're getting a blowjob, so it's worth it. Or a female blowjob.
I believe that's called cunnilingus.
Suck job. But they think they may have fixed it, and so the $400,000 helmet was not working. When you go at low altitudes, pilots were having trouble seeing, and this is in a jet that just catches fire at random intervals.
So you're on fire and you can't see. Basically.
It sounds like a fucking hellstorm, and this is what our country dumps money into. This is where the money is going. Like, this is how you end up. This is how you end up with $21 trillion unaccounted for at the Pentagon. This is and I've described the Pentagon as basically a giant money laundering system, because that's what it is. It takes U.S. tax dollars and funnels them into the pockets of our military-industrial complex, which, you could say, well, a lot of that money doesn't actually end up in the pockets of but the CEO of these companies, of Lockheed Martin, of Raytheon, of Boeing, they make more the higher ratio compared to the average worker in those companies than almost any other company. It's like 189 times or over 200 times what the average worker at that company makes. They are pocketing millions upon millions of dollars to continue to build this collapsing, ridiculous jet forever, like for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is as we say, we don't have money for healthcare. We don't have money for infrastructure. We don't have money to fix our goddamn bridges. It was 60,000 structurally deficient bridges in this country. You drive across a bridge every day, probably, that is not up to par, that could collapse. And meanwhile, we have $400,000 for a fucking non-functional helmet.
And it's so upsetting that Lee is literally dying. And I just read another article about the bridges the other day, saying that because of the heat from climate change, these already deficient bridges are going to be even more deficient because the heat causes things like buckling and So
Cement
however shitty you thought it was,
asphalt gets very fucking hot.
Yeah. So I say we should all start rowing.
Our ass is on fire, and it's time to get angry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is our show, but we are going to head over to patreon.com/commoncensored to do a few more minutes. For anybody that's a member over there, if you feel you got $1 or $2 out of this episode, please go join at patreon.com/commoncensored and check out the tour dates. Also, if you vote for your city to be added to the tour, There's a good likelihood it might happen because I am gearing up for a book tour. So now's the time to go vote at leecamp.com/schedule. You got anything to add?
You can find all of my work at artkillingapathy.com. This week on Act Out, I am talking about AFRICOM, and I am interviewing Chairman Omali Yeshitela about things like AFRICOM and revolution. I'm also talking about revolution and what's going on in Chile. Have somebody with some insight from Santiago talking about that. So, yeah, good show. And follow me at Activist Eleanor, and you're at Lee Camp.
Oh, you're talking about Twitter?
Mm-hmm.
On the Tweetsville. Yeah, at Lee Camp, at Activist Eleanor. Everybody, keep fighting out there.
Act out.